The universe of Elite Dangerous is harsh, both thematically and in practice. It's a cutthroat galaxy of mercenaries, pirates, war, black markets, and ominous mysteries reeling from a history of galactic conflict. Meanwhile, its actual gameplay can be just as tough to learn as its galaxy is unforgiving. This is because Elite is underpinned by a relatively strict commitment to pseudo-realism. Frontier Developments has designed Elite not just as a space shooter, but a space simulator, one that takes place across a 1-to-1 scale recreation 400 billion star system Milky Way galaxy. And as such, there are different procedures for docking, trading, combat, hauling cargo, and jumping between star systems, all things that take time to learn and take time to do. You can experience the galaxy by yourself, only ever meeting NPCs, or hop into open play and brave Elite's Wild West-like outer space, where you'll chance encountering other players with their own possibly questionable motives. What may surprise you is that, born from Elite's steep learning curve and unsparing simulation roots, is a player group whose attitude is really quite the opposite. The Fuel Rats, interstellar Samaritans who stand in contrast to Elite's callous universe. Their objective? To help those in need, specifically players without fuel. In Elite, running out of fuel and stranding yourself in the middle of empty space is a real and very common possibility, and it can come at a hefty price too. It's a grindy game, and outfitting ships and flying them places requires time and a lot of credits. Elite's rigidity, coupled with its grind, means death can have severe consequences, even once players establish themselves with better ships and a good amount of cash. When you die in Elite, your galactic insurance gives you the choice to rebuy the ship you died in at a discount, or respawn in a free Sidewinder, Elite's starter ship. Whichever option you select, you'll respawn back at a space station. Depending on how much money you have and what kind of ship you died in, rebuying your ship could be anything from an annoyance to a sizable dent in your in-game money. There are other consequences though, some even experienced players can't escape. What if you're out of fuel thousands of light years away from the nearest space station? What if you're carrying tons of valuable cargo? What if you collected some high-priced bounties and plan on selling them for cash? If you die, you lose any collected cargo or bounty vouchers, and if you're out exploring the far reaches of the galaxy, death means you're sent right back to a space station. Your trip and all the light years you covered are cut short. Suffice it to say, death isn't great, and you definitely don't want to run out of fuel. Without it, you can't travel, and eventually, even your oxygen will run out. Luckily, this is where the Fuel Rats come in. If you're stranded and low on fuel, call the Fuel Rats and they'll scurry your direction, refill your ship, and give you pointers on how to avoid running out of fuel in the future. The Rats are a lifeline out of interstellar dead ends, and a far better and cheaper option than waiting for your oxygen to run out or self-destructing. They've performed nearly 70,000 successful rescues, saving commanders from the bubble, where you'll find most space stations and populated star systems, and even all the way out to the Milky Way's most desolate, extreme edges. Over the years, I've spent my fair share of time in Elite, and have experienced it from just about every standpoint. I've hauled cargo, mined asteroids, hunted bounties, dogfighted, and aimlessly explored the Milky Way's giant cosmic arms. I've even needed saving from the Fuel Rats. But going on rescue missions and teaching players the ins and outs of refueling and plotting, that I'd never experienced. That is until January 2020, when I joined the Fuel Rats. I spent a month not only with the Fuel Rats, but as one. I trained as a Fuel Rat, hung out with them, followed them on rescues, made some rescues myself, and even interviewed a few. They're a group of volunteers, people from different countries with different backgrounds and of different ages, but all with the same eagerness to respond to calls for help. The Rats have been around nearly as long as Elite Dangerous itself, and began with an idea from one Commander Surly Badger, a self-described grumpy old fart who didn't desire leadership and wasn't a fan of rules. Badger initially envisioned the Fuel Rats as an anarchic collective of wildly disparate commanders who have their own reasons and agendas, reflecting the overall randomness and nastiness/glory of humanity. This idea was philosophically reinforced by what Surly Badger called the doctrine of individual excellence, a belief in maximizing the power of a collective through autonomous individuals. The Fuel Rats sum this up as, simply, if we do our best individually, then collectively we'll be awesome.
Well, I think the overall objective is to fuel those who need fuel. It's so simple. But if we're talking about the ethos fuel ratting, then I think it comes down to helping others, helping those who are in need, just doing it without any ego. Just go there and give them fuel and get out.
That's Commander Orange Sheets, a longtime rat who joined the group nearly as soon as they formed in 2015. The group's website and text chat are funded privately and through donations, and their in-game service is free as well. It was decided pretty much from the beginning that there would be no set fee for rescues, meaning no mandatory transfer of cargo or goods in return for the rats refueling a client.
Actually, from the get-go, it was discussed whether to do this for free or is there any kind of way to get payment. But it was very quickly read that no payments, because it's just much simpler. If you're a new player and you have started up and on your first hour of flying you run out of fuel, then you don't have any means to pay anyways. And if you're some long-range explorer who has ran out of fuel in God knows how many thousands of light years from the bubble, the rats who go there and rescue them actually do get paid when they honk on the way and then sell the exploration data. The universe pays us. And also it's good karma.
This sentiment seemed to echo with a lot of members like Little Fool, a veteran fuel rat with more than 750 rescues.
I personally don't want to have anything in return from the clients, mainly because I don't need any money in the game right now. It's really just a hassle. Like if someone wants to give you stuff they mined, like void opals or whatever, it's just a hassle to pick up, really. I don't see it's possible in the game, and I don't see it's necessary, because in the end it doesn't cost you anything to refuel someone. It only costs you time. I don't think that paying in-game is a good way, or would be a good way to pay your real-life time. That's not how it works for me.
When it comes to the galaxy's politics, wars, and crime, the rats don't take sides. And while members are working as rats, player versus player combat is strictly forbidden. If rats are attacked by another player, fighting back is not an option. There's even a famous story about the first rat ambushed and held hostage by a player group of pirates. The pirates demanded a ransom of 200 tons of platinum, and the rats counter-offered, telling the pirates they'd take their rat back if the pirates paid them 100 tons of gold and 3 Snickers bars. The pirates opened fire on the rat, but it was an important building block in who and what the rats are today. As Commander Surly Badger wrote, "We cannot be the good guys if we take sides, assemble war fleets, blacklist people who don't play the way we want. Our actions speak for us. We have fuel, you don't. Any questions?" Any other response eventually turns us into a war guild or an extortion racket, or encourages more pirates to amuse themselves by wasting their time and hours. So, barring you're over the age of 13, all players, new and experienced, can join the rats and go ratting, a curious verb considering you're taking time to help people. On joining, you'll be asked to read their standard operating procedures, guidelines that cover how the group communicates, coordinates, and executes rescues. The fuel rats don't consider the SOP rules, but the SOP shouldn't and can't be ignored either. Deviating from the SOP happens, but only with sufficient reason. Additionally, while not strictly mandatory, it's highly recommended new rats complete various training exercises before they attempt rescues. A rescue is kind of split in 2 phases, the rescue itself and a debrief. Once a client's safe, it's then the rat's job to show them the basics of refueling an elite, like how to scoop fuel from stars, or teach them about KGB foam, an acronym of sorts that lists star types you can scoop from. Of course, part of understanding the SOP and having some training under your belt is also making sure your ship is outfitted and ready to fuel. Ships in Elite are highly customizable, each with differing slots for weapons, supports, and optional internal compartments, where you'll put things your ship doesn't necessarily need in order to fly, like shield generators, cargo bays, or hull reinforcements. Generally speaking, how you customize your ship really depends on your playstyle and what kind of jobs you're interested in, whether they be combat or commercial. As a rat, you'll need at least a fuel scoop, a cargo hold that can carry at least 8 limpets, and a fuel transfer limpet controller, with With these 3 modules installed, you'll store limpets in your cargo bay and fire them at players that need fuel, which transfers fuel from your ship to theirs. While rats do the endgame work, a dispatcher acts as a liaison between clients and any rat assigned to their case. Oftentimes, dispatch is a client's first line of contact, and instructs them how to proceed while assigned rats jump to the client's position. This communication structure is important. Clients may have questions or changes in their status, and rats need to jump and may have interruptions of their own, like attacks from other players or NPCs. Dispatch, however, doesn't see what's happening in-game, so rats still need to provide updates on the in-game situation. The fuel rats assign clients case numbers and use a loose collection of codes and abbreviations to relay information back to dispatch, resulting in easier and faster updates. For example, the code 1fuel plus means a rat has successfully fueled case number 1. Learning how to communicate effectively and concisely, especially while traffic is heavy, took me a little time to get right. Jumping between star systems in Elite is fairly simple, but just active enough that constantly taking your hands away from the helm can really slow you down. Finding the right groove between flying my ship, scooping if I needed to, charging my next jump, and updating dispatch took me a while and came with experience and observation. In fact, during my first few days as a rat, that's pretty much all I did. I outfitted my ship to rescue, trained, and observed, noting how the more experienced rats communicated and handled tougher rescues. If I needed to summarize the biggest lesson I learned as a fuel rat, it would be that context is crucial. From structuring debriefs to rescue techniques, I found that solutions and the best course of action for any given situation were often dependent on the situation itself. Firing a fuel limpet at someone may sound easy, and that's because in a vacuum it mostly is. Elite has 2 main states of play, supercruise and normal space. Supercruise is when you're traveling around star systems flying at and far beyond the speed of light, and normal space is when you're flying around space stations or landing on planets. Speeds in normal space are closer to that of aircraft. To give someone fuel, you'll have to fly to their position in supercruise, drop in on them in normal space, and fire your fuel limpet. But ratting is highly contextual. Not every rescue is as straightforward as finding a client and giving them fuel. With that said, your basic standard rescue could, and in my experience usually did, go down something like this. A commander runs out of fuel, goes to the fuel rat's website to ask for fuel, and reports their commander's name, position, platform, and oxygen status. Once the call goes out, the client is prepped, told to come to a full stop, and to disable all of their ship's modules except life support. This reduces how much fuel the client's ship consumes, allotting the rats more time to get there. Any rats willing to make the trip call their jumps. There is no schedule for rats, the job is at will and voluntary, but if you call jumps, you are expected to begin jumping, barring dispatch doesn't assign you to the case or something comes up that stops you from making the trip, in which case you need to report it to dispatch. Once rats have called their jumps, dispatch assigns specific rats and instructs the client to send friend requests to those rats through Elite. Once the requests go through, the client is instructed to form a wing with the rats, essentially putting all the players in the same party, and activate their wing beacon, which reveals their position once the rats reach the client's star system. Rats should see the beacon, drop in on the client, fuel them up, and begin their debrief. As the fuel rats SOP say, a rat's fight isn't against other ships or aliens, but against time, distance, and Elite Zone mechanics. A rat and their client may encounter bugs or trouble instancing, all things the rats have to contend with. Outside standard rescues, there are long-range rescues and Code Reds, both of which change up the fuel rat formula as well. Code Red rescues, perhaps the most complex, are when the client is on emergency oxygen. If your ship is so low on fuel that emergency oxygen kicks in, it means you can't move, and when the counter runs out, you die. Here, there may be more rats assigned than the normal 2, possibly 3, or on rare occasions, more. When a client reports they're on emergency oxygen, or O2, they're ordered to log out to the main menu, which stops their O2 counter. Trouble is, at the main menu, clients can see what system they're in, but they may not remember where in the system they were, or how much time their O2 had left. Adding to the complications, when you're on emergency O2, Elite forces you to to wait 15 seconds to log out. So you can have clients log back in and report their specific position, but it'll cost you time. With code reds, there are a lot of variables at play, and the rats may have to coordinate based off incomplete information. One technique the rats use is a bearing check. If dispatch feels the client has enough oxygen left and the rats have reached the client's system, dispatch will instruct the client to log in, set their beacon to wing, and send wing invites so the rats can get a quick read on their direction and distance. Depending on a few factors, including distance and remaining O2, the client may be close enough to stay logged on or ordered to log out, leaving the rats with an idea of where to fly. I spent my month as a fuel rat only in-game and never did attempt dispatching. It's a job that can be calm and chaotic, sometimes both within a few minutes. No, for me, ratting was experience enough, and it was enjoyable. It probably won't surprise you to know that helping people is nice. The cheerful reactions of rescued clients transcends language barriers and really is one of the most unique gaming experiences I've ever had, especially for a multiplayer title. There are slow days, times I'd spend an hour or so just waiting. I'd have a show on in the background, my galaxy map open, ready to type in the system of our next client. The other rats and I would chat about our favorite ships in Elite, rescue techniques, TV shows, candy bars, all sorts of stuff. But just as easily as the day can be slow, things can get busy too. Rat signals appear out of nowhere, clients gasping for fuel across the bubble and beyond, and suddenly you're jumping into action, ready to spend the next few minutes, half hour or more, saving a client and debriefing them. My first few rescues were a little intimidating. There's no real-life consequences to losing a client, but you still don't want to let anyone down, especially when you're someone who's seen the deflating, gut-wrenching results of dying in the middle of a long expedition. In failure, the rats are not quick to point fingers, but they are quick to discuss how the situation could have been handled differently. Debates over procedure and a willingness to bluntly hash out details and break down broken rescues certainly made me want to become the best rat I could be. For successful rescues, the first rat to transfer fuel from their ship to the client's ship gets credited with the rescue. Once I felt comfortable to go for rescues, I often found myself to be the second rat to arrive on scene, even if I beat the other rat to the client's star system. As evidenced by their 96% success rate, the rats are exceedingly good at saving people. Whether you're on PC, Xbox, or PlayStation, and no matter where in the galaxy you are, the rats will do what they can to rescue you. For the fuel rats, at the end of the day, whichever planet you're on, that clients get saved is what matters. With that said, it can certainly be tough, even frustrating, to get your first few rescues in, especially for newer players who may not have longer jump ranges. The rats recommend at least a 20 light-year jump range before you attempt rescues, and I can attest to that. When I began my ratting career, Faraday, my trusty ASP Explorer, had somewhere around a 45 light-year jump range. It worked fine for my own purposes, but if I wanted to be the first rat to make contact with clients, I'd need to upgrade my ship. So, after going through some of Elite's more involved ways of upgrading your ship's jump range, I boosted Faraday to about 60 light years. The effort paid off. Systems that were 4 or 5 jumps away were now only 2 or 3. Commander Alternative joined the Rats for the Distant Worlds 2 event in 2019, when more than 12,000 players explored across the Milky Way, and has since collected 200 rescues.
I guess my advice would be not to care if you are the first one that fires a limpet. Because more often than not, and that's true for me and as for most other people, you will not be the first one. Do your best, try to improve how you are handling things. Just work on yourself and on the things you can improve, and eventually you will get there.
After a few tries, I did end up getting my first rescue, and my time observing other rats turned out to be just as useful as upgrading my jump range. For example, one trick I learned early on, which now seems obvious, was to not stop flying. In Elite, when you jump into a new star system, your ship appears, in the vast majority of cases, outside of a star. In my early playing days, and even somewhat today, my first inclination was to either slow down or fly into a position where I could scoop and throttle down. Nowadays in Elite, there's even a Super Cruise Assist module that'll slow your ship down automatically when you enter star systems. But for normal cases, there really isn't a reason to slow down. It takes time to accelerate in Elite, time that's better saved by keeping your throttle up and putting yourself in a holding pattern while you wait to make contact. What's more is, if you're in a wing, there's an option called Wingman Navlock that, even at full speed, automatically drops you at your wingman's location, barring you're close to them. Unlike flying to space stations, where you're forced to slow down and usually enter a few kilometers away, navlock will drop you with your wingman much closer. It's a great and effective way to shave a couple precious seconds off of a rescue. But of course, ratting is contextual, and not every technique fits all scenarios. On one rescue, my second ever, I had a client stuck in a system with a T-Tari star. T-Tari stars are both common and not scoopable, making them, at least in my experience, a place commanders are often left stranded. During this particular call, I got the client's wing invite, engaged navlock, began flying toward the client's beacon, and navlock pulled me into what I thought was their position. Instead, they were still 16 megameters away, inside an exclusion zone, also known as an EZ. Exclusion zones are essentially boundaries around objects where Elite automatically drops you from supercruise, forcing you into normal space. Clients stuck in EZs can make for mildly tricky rescues. If a client isn't on emergency oxygen, like mine wasn't, they'll need to engage their frameshift drive and enter supercruise. For newer players, this can be somewhat confusing. To jump away from an EZ, you have to make sure you untarget anything your ship has targeted and point your ship toward an escape vector to jump. Anything else and your FSD charges, heating your ship up, but your ship won't jump away. If you're stuck in a STARS EZ, things can get a little more nerve-wracking. Not only is there a super bright ball of fire next to you, but your ship will get much hotter and start to spark and smoke and even take some damage. In all rescues, whether it's just to send a friend request or exit an EZ, dispatch won't just tell clients what to do, but how to do it. And while educating players about Elite in its entirety may not be strictly a part of a fuel rat's job, I certainly think helping players learn is a side effect of it. In this precise case of mine, the client was a new player, and had dispatch not instructed how to exit the EZ, we may have not been able to rescue them.
I mentioned that before on the things I like doing with the rats is education is the main thing. I mean, Elite is a game that's not easy to learn how to handle, I guess I would put it. It has a very steep learning curve, and there will definitely be a lot of players that run into problems like running out of fuel in the middle of nowhere that they feel they can't overcome, and I guess a lot of them will then just flat out stop playing at some point because they are overwhelmed. Helping people that need advice, that need direction, but at the same time want to learn how to play the game better and handle it in the right way is, in the long run, beneficial to the community as a whole.
Luckily, most of my rescues were fairly standard. Perhaps my biggest mistake came on my first and only attempt at a long-range rescue. Long-range rescues are defined as any client more than 1,000 light-years away from the bubble's edge. If you're jumping between two places in the bubble with a 60 light-year jump range, it'll probably only take you a few minutes to reach your destination. But if clients call from far out beyond the bubble, it could take hours to reach them, even if you have a longer jump range. There was a client stuck nearly 15,000 light-years away from the bubble, near the galaxy's edge. The max distance you can plot in Elite is 20,000 light-years, about a fifth of the galaxy's diameter. When I initially plotted from the bubble, I was unable to get the galaxy map to set my route, even though it's within that 20,000 light-year limit. Now, when you're traveling around the Milky Way, it's important to keep in mind that star density is inconsistent. Go above or below the galaxy's plane, and there are fewer stars to jump between. If you have to cross between galactic arms, you might run into dead zones, gaps of near empty space that can be tough to cross. Compounding the issue is that Elite's galaxy map routes in a relatively straight line. It largely can't compensate for turns you'll need to make or areas you'll need to go around. Furthermore, between me and the client's location is a large area of locked star systems. Frontier Developments has certain portions of the galaxy locked, and no one knows for sure why, though it's often speculated the systems will be home to future content. What's important is you can't jump through or into locked systems, and there happens to be a large area of locked systems near Bernard's Loop, which was in between the client and me. And all of these factors coalesced into my bungled long-range attempt. Under suspicion that the locked area near Bernard's Loop was giving the galaxy map fits, I began my trip plotting toward the Crab Nebula, planning to use it as a halfway point where I'd stop en route to the client's position. Turns out it wasn't Bernard's Loop that was stopping me, it was the gap between these two arms. It had taken me an hour or so to reach the Crab Nebula, and the client had already logged out and left the Rat's online chat room. Without knowing whether or not the client would get back on, my only choice was to loop down and around the gap, adding hours and thousands of light years to my trip. Eventually I found a route across the galactic gap and into the client's arm, but it was late and I had to log off. Luckily, after I was asleep, a more experienced rat with a longer jump range was able to make contact with the client, jump across the arm from a closer distance, and save the client. I learned a lesson: don't underestimate the vastness of space. It sounds silly, but a 60 light-year jump range and plenty of exploration experience forged just enough hubris in me that my long-range attempt turned into nothing but hours of endless jumping, though the client was rescued after all. I began my month as a fuel rat as a nervous, bright-eyed, and bushy-tailed recruit, and at the end, even while exceedingly more confident, knowledgeable, and capable, I still had plenty of ratting wisdom left to learn. But maybe the most fascinating thing about the fuel rats is why, individually, they do what they do. All the rats I talked with enjoyed helping people and teaching them the game, of course, but they also had their own reasons, too.
I mean, we all know that Elite doesn't really give you goals apart from, hey, get this ship, or hey, reach Elite. It's kind of a nice thing to wait for a call and have something to do. And then what I learned when I properly started being a fuel rat is that it's mostly about teaching people about the game and how not to run out of fuel again. And I just like transferring what I know and teaching people stuff. The last thing I really like doing is, I don't know, challenging myself, basically. So what I'm doing right now in the fuel rats is mostly long-range rescues, like several thousand light years out of the bubble, and that's for me mostly about how fast can I get there.
Well, I personally enjoy each and every rescue that happens, whether it succeeds or not. Every attempt is a cause for joy to me, since I've been around since the beginning. And so I've been observing it, and from day to day, how it kind of began and how we attracted more people, lots of new people coming in almost daily. And they might do one rescue or couple and then vanish, but some stick around and then new people join. It's amazing to see how much people are willing to do good, you know.
Yeah, you get to know people. You meet occasionally nice people, and sometimes I just don't have anything else to do in the game. It's like a end game thing for me. The fuel rats. Like if you are in the wrong quote unquote places in the game, you will never see another commander. And with the fuel rats, well, you always see another commander. And if you are into like exploration and things like this, then fuel rats is a really good way to see the galaxy, really, because you're following commanders basically to where you would never have gone otherwise, probably.
I think, in some ways, Surly Badger's vision all those years ago of the wildly disparate group of commanders who share a common goal, even if for different reasons, has come to fruition. So, if you're ever out of fuel, if you're ever stranded in the apathetic, empty chill of deep space, give the rats a call. They won't ask for anything, because to the fuel rats, it's simple. They have fuel, you don't. Any questions?